In today's video, I'm going to talk you through a very traditional triangle arrangement in floral foam. If this is something that you would like to learn to do, then keep watching today's tutorial. Welcome back to today's tutorial. Now I am wishing that I'd listened to the weather forecast this morning because the wind and the rain at the moment is dreadful, and I'm thinking that maybe we've got a storm heading our way and that maybe I should be heading on home. But before I head on home, I'm going to create a bit of a traditional arrangement. I think we haven't done a traditional shape for a little while. I love this container, and this container is visually very heavy. There's a lot going on in it, and it's going to really draw your eye and become quite dominant. So what I look to do when I'm creating this arrangement is have some foliage angled downwards so that we just disguise this container a little bit so it doesn't take your eye away from the fresh flowers. Now this is a huge container, it's also very heavy. It's an Oasis product, and I believe you can probably still buy this on the Oasis website. It's called Papyrus Vase, and it's actually classed as brown. I would call that grey. And the grey tone is going to work so nicely with the lilac and purple shades that I've got for today. I have used this container before. I can probably link the video up here. And if you don't know what I mean by link, you just click on this little white box here and it'll take you back to the video where I've used this once before. So rather than filling the whole container with floral foam, I'm going to go with that sort of second container trick. This one fits perfectly inside here, and that means I can use less floral foam. I don't have to fill this up with foam that's going to get wasted. I can just use the top section. Because it's a traditional arrangement and I want to come out at the sides, I need to have my foam above the edge of the container. And there's plenty of room down the side here that I can add water to keep the foam hydrated. That's one area that I know many people don't remember to do. If you don't keep the foam wet, your flowers are going to die. Keep it wet, keep your flowers alive. Right, so I'm going to start today by creating the outline shape, and in my case today it's going to be a triangle. By creating the outline shape, and in my case today it's going to be a triangle. It's a tall container, it's visually heavy, so we need to go about 1.5 to twice the height of our container. Now I have got some pussy willow, which is going to extend the height a little bit taller. I don't have a huge amount of greenery today. I wasn't planning on doing this arrangement, but I've got enough roses here to do a nice design. So what I'm going to do, this is Laurel, I'm going to place this towards the back of the foam. That gives me plenty of room here at the front so I can put my fresh flowers in. And the reason I'm tilting it back is so that the overhead camera picks it up. So I've now got all this space here in the front to put my fresh flowers. And when I use the pussy willows later, I'll extend the height slightly higher. Now what I'm going to do is to create some width. And think back to when you were in school. We all learnt about triangles. Some triangles are equal-sided, and that's an equilateral triangle. There is a reason why I'm not teaching maths and I teach floristry. An equilateral triangle will be the same size on all 3 sides. Most triangles we do in floral design are taller than they are wide, but there's no set rule. Don't feel that you have to follow a size and a shape that you've seen in a magazine. If you want to go taller and narrower or shorter and wider, that's fine. Don't worry too much about it. So I've cut myself 2 pieces of the greenery to be a similar length, and these are going to create the sides of my arrangement. And I think that one is slightly longer. Yes, it is. So we're going to bring these out at the side. And because it's an elevated container, I'm going to angle the greenery down. If we were flat on the table, these would come out more horizontally. But because the container is raised, we're going to come down. And the greenery on the side is in line with this piece of greenery at the back. It's not forward here in the foam. It's towards the back, almost in line with this bit of greenery at the back. If you like things symmetrical, you can do what I've done here and balance them off with 2 matching pieces of greenery. But if you like things a little bit more playful and not quite so formal, then you can use different greenery on either side. You can be as imaginative and as creative as you want to be. Don't feel that everything has to be perfectly matching when your design is equal on both sides. So I've angled my greenery down slightly, not hugely. It helps to cover that metal secondary container, but it also brings the greenery down to help cover a little bit of that heavy base, because that is really quite visually heavy. And I'm just going to add a couple of pieces in at the back. This is a weighty container, it's really quite heavy, so I'm not concerned that it's going to tip forward. But this is an important job to do if you're doing tall flower arrangements. If you don't have weight at the back, it's going to tip forward. And it also helps to create the depth of the floral design. Now there is still foam showing at the back, and I will cover that as we go along, but I've got the basic outline shape in. So if we follow a line from the top to the edge, you hopefully can see a triangle shape. If I had more of the laurel, I would probably put 2 pieces either side here, but I don't have any more. But I do have some eucalyptus. But what I like about the eucalyptus is that it's slightly curvy and a bit bendy, and that is also going to drape down nicely. Now, those of you with eagle eyes might notice that the eucalyptus is a bit damaged. This has actually come from my garden, and we're just about sort of coming out of winter now into spring, and I cut it in the dark, and I didn't actually notice that it wasn't quite as nice quality as I thought. So excuse the fact, a little bit damaged on the outside, but it's a lovely colour link with the grey base, and it's good enough for me to use to add a bit of variation in texture and a variation and contrast in colour. And then for the centre, I'm going to use a lovely Hebe. This is also from my garden, and this is a beautiful purple shade. And darker colours like the purple are always good in the middle of an arrangement because it creates recession and it draws your eye downwards. But I do have some quite long pieces, so I think I'm going to make use of these on the outside. That wasn't my plan. But being that I've got the length in it, I might as well use it here on the outside. So again, if you think about that imaginary line, we don't want to bring any of this greenery wider than that imaginary line. And hopefully I've got a few long pieces left that I can bring a similar shape over onto the other side. Again, I'm not overthinking it, and I'm not trying to mirror it perfectly on one side to the other. If you think about nature, nothing in nature is perfectly matching. The left-hand side of a tree or a bush or a plant is never the same as the right side. So don't feel that when you're creating these traditional shapes, they have to be perfect on both sides, because they don't. You just have to create an outline that's a triangle. Now my thoughts at the moment is that the height of the arrangement is too short for the size and the visual dominance of the base. So before I go any further, I'm going to add in some of these delightful little pussy willows, and I'm going to create some extra height. And I can do that by just adding this in front of or behind that greenery, just so I can extend the height a little bit to make the whole arrangement taller. Now traditional proportions are 1/3 to 2/3, so the height should be twice the height of your container, or 1.5 if you're struggling with material. But what that's done straight away is just elevated the height so that now my arrangement is more proportionally in keeping with my container. So if you've got a heavily patterned container, or it's a dark colour, or it's a heavy texture, a bit like this one is here, then you sometimes need to go a little bit higher to draw your eye upwards away from that heavy base at the bottom. And what that's also done is it's repeated the lines that are in the container, so your eye travels up the line all the way to the top. And line material in the floral design is really important because it creates the outline and it defines the shape. And another example of line are these fantastic, I think these might be my favourite this week. This is Delphinium. This is a lovely white, and that's also a line flower. So what I'm going to do with these is reinforce the outline that I've already created. Now the foliage outline that you've already created forms the size of your arrangement. So by adding in these little spray flowers on the side, we want to keep them within the foliage outline you've already created. We're not going to go any wider. But what the little sprays are going to do is help to define that outline, particularly where I was lacking in extra greenery. So try and remember that line flowers like this create the outline. They're very rarely used in the centre of an arrangement. And what this does is it draws your eye up and down rather than the round shape which draws you in almost like a full stop. And if you're not familiar with what I'm talking about, these are the elements and principles of design. And these are the guidelines that we use for all different types of floral design. They have slightly different names in different parts of the world, but basically they mean the same. And if you're not familiar with them, then there's a free guide that you can download. You'll find a link to it in the description box, which is underneath the video. It's a free basic guide that will help you understand the elements and principles of design. And if you want something that's a bit more complex, if you're studying floristry at college, or you've just started work in a florist shop, then that more comprehensive guide will help you understand how you're to use your flowers in different ways. So I'm going to finish off with that one at the back, but what the white delphinium has done is it's framed the outline. It's been added to the foliage that created the shape, and that line shape draws your eye downwards towards the focal point. Now the next flower I'm going to use is Statice. This is Statice limonium, and this normally dries really well. It's pretty damp in the UK this time of the year, and if you could see the weather that was outside at the moment, you'd wonder why on earth I was in work at all. It normally dries really well, and in the summer this would be something that would dry quite naturally in the studio, but because of that sort of damp air that we've got at the moment, this hasn't survived as well as it should be. So if you notice a few little petals dropping off while I'm arranging with it, don't panic too much. I'm basically using it up because it's here in the studio and it's not good enough to be used in anything else. So Statice limonium, or everlasting flower, this is a great one to grow in the garden. You can grow it really well from seed. And I've done really the same thing as I did with the white flower at the back, the delphinium. I've used it to reinforce the triangular shape and to bring the colour towards the outside. With the pieces I've got left, I'm going to use them more towards the centre. I have a lady that comes here to do flower arranging classes, and she does really well at drying flowers. So anything she buys that she doesn't use in class, she ties it with an elastic band and places it in the airing cupboard in the house. And that nice warm circulation of air dries the flowers off really well. So if you've got roses left over from the supermarket that you haven't used, or maybe you want to change them for new flowers, then consider hanging them up to dry and see how successful you can be. If you've got a lovely airy kitchen and maybe you've got an Arga or a Rayburn, or you've got a warm room somewhere in the house, then it would be ideal for drying off your flowers. So my rose of choice for this arrangement is Cool Water. This is a lovely lilac rose, and I'm going to start by adding one in at the height. Now I've left some of the leaves on these because I always think in a traditional arrangement a rose looks a bit bald when it doesn't have any leaves. I'm going to start off here at the height, and as a florist I do something called a focal line, and I bring the flowers down through the centre of the arrangement. This is not something that flower arrangers do, so if you've learnt flower arranging at your local college, then you might have learnt a different method. But to get that nice even distribution of the colour, I'm going to create a staggered line here down through the front with the more open rows, the biggest, more open rows, 2/3 of the way down where the focal point would be. Now off camera, I have already removed any of the petals from the outside of these roses, and I've removed all the thorns to make sure that my rose can get inserted into the floral foam more easily. This area here is roughly where the focal point is going to be. So this should be your 2 bigger flowers, or 3 bigger flowers if you have them. And then we're going to finish with a more closed rose down towards the bottom. But what I have done is I've elevated the profile so the arrangement isn't flat. And this bottom flower should be away from the container, not pushed back in close towards the foam. It's a mistake that a lot of beginners make. They have this almost like a bellied effect where we come out and then we tuck in at the bottom. From the side, it needs to look like a triangle, or at least half a triangle, with an elevated profile here at the front. I'm just going to slightly push it in because it's a bit out too far, but there we are, that's better. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that creates the focal line down through the front. Traditionally, we're always taught to use odd flowers, but you don't have to use odd flowers. It just tends to be a bit more pleasing to the eye. So I've got 5 flowers left, and my plan was to put 3 on either side, but I haven't quite got enough. So I'm going to add another one to that focal line. So don't worry, we're not trying to pass exams, it's not a competition, we're just trying to enjoy some flowers at home. So don't feel guilty and don't stress yourself out if you haven't got exactly what it says in the book that you've been learning your floral design from. We can be a little bit more playful in our designs, and if it's a bunch of 10 roses that you can afford from the supermarket, or you've got 6 in a bouquet that you've been given as a gift, then arranging those in a pleasant manner is more important than trying to follow those set rules. Flowers are broken up into 3 categories. We have line flowers that define the outline shape. We have round flowers that are generally the focal flower or the more important flower. And then we have something called transitional material, which are spray flowers or filler flowers that fill in any of the gaps. And I tend to use the filler flower last. Before I use that, I'm going to introduce some of the lovely allium. Now this looks beautiful. The variety is flocon, which means snowflake, and you can just imagine that coming down in a heavy snowstorm. But they're part of the onion family, so they might look beautiful, but they don't smell particularly nice. And as soon as you cut them, you get a very pungent odour, just like sort of rotten onions. So it's not the best flower to have in the house. And it does slightly frustrate me sometimes when you see these used in bridal designs, and I imagine what it must smell like for the bride carrying that down the aisle. So what I'm going to do with the white allium is place them more towards the centre of the design, and that's going to help link with the white colour on the outside. So we've got that lovely delphinium white that creates the outline shape, but I didn't have any white towards the middle. And by using the bigger, rounder allium in the middle, it connects all the colours and again creates that design that has a more harmonious look. Now I can tell at this stage that the foam that I'm using is fairly full. So I'm getting to the point where it's difficult to add flowers into the arrangement. So that's normally a good indication to stop trying to force more flowers into the foam, because it's just going to disintegrate. One of my little alliums did snap while I was trying to put it in, so I'm just going to use this up at the back rather than waste it. And I quite often say this in a tutorial, when you're thinking about your mechanics and you're deciding how big your floral foam needs to be, consider how many flowers you're planning on using. Have they got thick stems? Have they got hollow stems? Have you got soft stems that you're trying to insert into the foam? And really consider your mechanics before you actually start, because it's no good getting to this stage of an arrangement and you've still got lots of flowers that you want to add in, but you've almost run out of foam. So this lovely little filler flower called wax flower has an amazing scent. If you've not used this before, as you cut into the stem, you get a lovely lemony scent. So hopefully that will counterbalance and mask the smell of my alliums. Now I think this is just really lovely. It's a very cool colour combination, very relaxing, a beautiful colour link, I think, between the container at the bottom. So I've got a couple of short pieces here of the wax flower, and again, rather than waste them, I'm going to pop them in just at the back. You've got the added bonus of that beautiful scent. I've also got a little bit of the Salix. This was the top of the Salix that didn't really suit the top of my arrangement, so I'm just going to add that in at the back as well. Now, one thing I don't always remember to mention in the video is that sometimes it's a good idea to leave just a little gap in the back so that you can easily water the floral foam. And if you're somebody that does church flowers, then that's a really good tip, because it'll be much easier to water them in situ. Now I don't think I'm going to add anything extra into this. I'm quite happy with the design itself. It's a really clear, traditional triangular shape with an even distribution of the different colours, textures, shapes and forms. It would be fantastic for me if you could subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell to be told every time I upload a new video. Like, share and comment in the box below and tell your friends all about us, because it's the only way the channel is really going to grow. Ask as many questions as you want in the comment box, and don't forget to stay to the end of the video because there's close-ups of the finished design and the individual flowers. And if you stay to the end, YouTube thinks that you're really enjoying the tutorial and it will push me higher up the rankings. So thanks for watching. I look forward to seeing you very soon. Bye for now.